Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources and insights you bring us, and we really dig into them to find the most interesting bits.
Yeah, and today you've brought us, well, a really fascinating case study, I think. It's about video game releases, specifically Super Mario 3D All-Stars.
Right. We got a couple of articles, plus a personal take on its, let's say, unusual sales approach.
So our goal here is to unpack why this collection of, genuinely beloved games just vanished. Poof. Gone from sales so quickly.
And how that maybe drove sales and what that signals about, well, modern gaming business tactics. Okay, let's jump in.
Let's do it.
So Super Mario 3D All-Stars. It landed September 18th, 2020, part of the big Super Mario 35th anniversary.
That's right. And it bundled three huge games, Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy, all cleaned up, remastered for the Switch.
Absolute classics. I mean, everyone knows these games. So what was strange about this release right from the get-go?
Well, here's the kicker. Even though these are universally seen as high points of 3D platforming, Super Mario 64 is often called a monument in gaming history.
Yeah, foundational stuff.
Exactly. Nintendo announced on day one that it would stop making physical copies and pull the digital version on March 31st, 2021.
Less than a year.
Way less. Barely 6 months, really. For such massive titles, that's, it's just really unusual.
It really is. Which brings us to the big question, why? Why would a company pull perfectly good, popular games? There weren't any, technical glitches or licensing problems reported, were there?
No, nothing like that. And that's where it gets interesting. We looked at this Vice Media piece where they quoted an anonymous developer.
Okay.
And their theory basically was that sometimes these re-released games, these classics, they just kind of sit on people's digital wish lists forever.
Right. You think, I'll get that someday.
Precisely. So the theory goes Nintendo used what this dev called artificial FOMO. Fear of missing out.
Ah, FOMO. So create a deadline to force people's hands.
That seems to be the idea. Make it scarce, create urgency, and boom, you accelerate those sales instead of letting them trickle in over years.
And we actually have numbers that suggest it worked.
Oh, absolutely. There's UK sales data showing that in the final week, the very last week before it was pulled, sales for 3D All-Stars jumped something like 276% compared to the week before. A huge spike.
Wow. Okay, so that urgency factor definitely kicked in, no denying that.
It clearly motivated people to buy now. But, while that looks great on a sales chart, it didn't land well with everyone.
Right. You mentioned the personal reflection we got. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this came from a listener, someone who described themselves as a really dedicated Nintendo fan, and they were just genuinely upset by this whole strategy.
Upset how?
Well, they see Nintendo as kind of unique these days, still really focused on family-friendly games, while PlayStation and Xbox have maybe leaned more into older audiences.
That's a fair point, yeah.
And so for them, taking games like Sunshine and Galaxy, which are still perfectly playable and fun for kids today, and making them basically unavailable on the Switch.
Unless you hunt down a used copy, probably at a high price.
Exactly, if you can even find one. It just felt wrong to them, like it went against that family image, and it was bad for, game preservation, making classics harder to access.
That really highlights the tension, doesn't it? Between a business move that, demonstrably worked in the short term, and the feeling from fans about accessibility and maybe the company's values.
Definitely. It puts the short-term sales boost from that artificial FOMO directly against the potential long-term hit to Nintendo's image and the whole idea of keeping these important games available.
So, looking ahead, what was the final thought from our source on this?
Their main sentiment was really a hope. A hope that with Mario's 40th anniversary coming up down the line, Nintendo maybe won't go back to these kinds of limited time tactics. They want the games to stick around.
It's such a tricky balance. Marketing strategies, preserving gaming history, keeping the fan base happy.
It really is.
So what do you take away from this intersection? It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is that quick sales win worth potentially damaging that long-term trust or making classics harder for new players to find?
Yeah, it's a really critical question in today's gaming world, especially with digital sales and ownership being so fluid.
Definitely something for you to think about. How games are sold, how they're preserved, and what we expect from the companies making them.